Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football, continuing to take a look at some of our favorite transfer portal classes, grade them out. Dill, this is a team that we weren't really planning on talking about, but when you take a look at some of the talent that they brought in through the transfer portal and what they really needed to replace from a magical season in 2022 under the first-year coach of Sonny Dykes, Dill, the TCU Horned Frogs brought in some really intriguing and talented players, and you look at this class in general, a lot of it has to do with guys who were really, really highly touted out of high school, went to that first spot, didn't really work out, and going to Sonny Dykes to kind of revitalize that career, especially on the offensive side of the football. Now, before we get into it again, just always want to take some time and say thank you to you guys. Whether we're talking high school recruiting, whether we're talking the transfer portal, whether we're doing game picks in the fall, you guys have been absolutely awesome. So again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. That helps the fellas out. And Dill, we've talked a lot of TCU football last year. It was truly a magical season for them. So again, TCU fans, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Gonna kick it to you here. An overall take on this TCU transfer portal class here, Dill.
I mean, I think the biggest thing to kind of remember about where Sonny Dykes is even though they obviously won the Big or kind of won the Big 12. I don't know. They should have won.
It counts. Went to the college football playoff, played for a national championship.
Yeah, exactly. They were the best team in the Big 12 all year. I think at the end of the day, Sonny Dykes, he's still a first-year or second-year head coach now. And again, it is kind of to be expected that a lot of guys leaving, both draft and portal, a lot of guys coming in the portal. And that's pretty much what you see with every coach who comes in now in college football is they turn these rosters over in the first couple of years of their regime. And Sonny Dykes, again, no different. He's done.
Sonny Dykes is a guy that at SMU did the same thing. SMU was always active in the transfer portal before the transfer portal was even that cool. And so Sonny Dykes kind of experienced with targeting guys that have played college football, maybe not making it work at their first stop, and kind of revitalizing their career a little bit. I want to start on the offensive side of the football because when you look at TCU trying to replicate what they did in 2022, and I get it's going to be hard to do, and I'm not saying they're going to run the table and go undefeated. They lost a lot. They're doing their best to kind of replace some of those guys, and the one guy you want to talk about is Quentin Johnston. He was truly that offense, and when they needed a play, they went to Quentin Johnston. They go out and get a guy in Dylan Wright from Texas A&M, then went to Minnesota, now at TCU, who kind of has that Quentin Johnston skill set. Big body, very good making those contested catches. Though we watch a lot of Big Ten football, and there's been times where Dylan Wright was he looked a little out of place playing in that Minnesota offense that just refused to throw the football. He's probably the guy that I'm most excited for in this TCU transfer portal class that not enough people are talking about.
Yeah, and again, they had a lot to replace in that wide receiver room. I mean, the only guy who really had any production was Savion
Williams, yeah.
And he was solid, but he wasn't. I mean, their top three are all gone for the most part at that spot. So there was a lot of guys to bring in, and that's what he did. That's what Sonny Dykes did. He knew what he had to do in this portal class, and he did it. I mean, to take guys like JoJo Earl, Dylan Wright, I mean, those are big names and
big names who were like out of the high school ranks, were some of the top recruits out of their class. And going back to kind of touching on some players they brought in and who they needed to replace, Quentin Johnston kind of getting replaced by Dylan Wright. I'm not saying Dylan Wright's going to be Quentin Johnston, but plays that similar role in the offense. And then trying to replace the speedster like Darius Davis or Tay Barber, you have some other pass catchers coming in. Jalen Robinson, a guy I remember about 12 months ago to this day, I was hyping him up in a big way when he transferred to Ole Miss. A guy that is super jittery, super twitched up with the ball in his hand, can kind of take the top off of a defense too. And JoJo Earl, again, TCU likes to operate in space. There's not many better wide receivers in the sense of getting the ball in space and making people miss than JoJo Earl, who just that Alabama offense, I know TCU fans probably pretty familiar with it. It was not it. And that Alabama team last year, really, if they don't have Bryce Young, that offense and that team's looking at like a 7-5, 8-4 ball club without Bryce Young because that offense sucked.
Yeah, and you got untapped potential across the board in this transfer portal. I mean, even a guy like Jack Beck,
yes,
he had some promise at LSU, and in that wideout room, like some guys like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, they really stepped up and kind of seized control of that room. But like you saw some moments when Jack Beck was getting some playing time earlier, and especially in 21, like he's a guy who can play. Again, there's guys on this across the board on this TCU portal class who just maybe weren't the right fit. I mean, Dylan Wright probably the most. Like you can't really be a great wide receiver at
Minnesota. Here's a crazy stat. Minnesota, barring the service academy programs, threw the ball by far the least amount. And so you have a guy, Dylan Wright, who's just a freak athlete that's just kind of rotting away, just blocking downfield. So getting him in that TCU offense, I'm excited about. And kind of going back to Jack Beck, who like Mason Taylor just kind of outplayed him. But Mason Taylor's going to be an NFL tight end, and I think Jack Beck could be a guy that he likes to split out wide as kind of a jumbo slot receiver, tight end kind of guy, hybrid. I think he's a perfect fit for that TCU offense. And continuing on the offense side of the ball, you lose Kendre Miller, who, Dill, when we talked about the NFL draft, Kendre Miller was one of our favorite running backs. Another, and this is a common theme, Sonny Dykes going to the highly touted kids out of high school. Trey Sanders was a top 10 national recruit coming into Alabama. He had some injuries. A super talented kid. I cannot wait to see him run in this TCU offense here.
Yeah, and just carrying on the theme of guys who just haven't quite caught their stride in college football, but have all the talent in the world. And again, you kind of, given what Sonny Dykes did last year, you kind of believe in him to make that happen.
100%.
That offense didn't change a whole lot from him his first year to Gary Patterson's last, and you saw a world of difference. And I imagine people are going to try to give Garrett Riley his credit for it, but Sonny Dykes is an offensive guy. I imagine a big part of that offense was him, and he certainly helped Garrett Riley increase his stock, and he moved on. But at the end of the day, you kind of trust Sonny Dykes to figure it out. He's got the horsepower, if you will, in terms of talent. It's just, can you find a way to make it work? And given what you've seen from Sonny Dykes, you kind of think he will at both SMU and last year at TCU.
Yeah, and another position that I think was kind of an underrated need in the sense of you lost some guys that were really, really good to the draft. Steve Avila gone, Alan Ali gone, and they go out and kind of address that interior offensive line. Colton Deary coming in from Maryland, Patrick Willis coming from Jackson State, and then a really interesting kid on the offensive line, particularly on the tackle position, Tommy Brockmeyer, who's from the state of Texas, another top 10 national recruit who was at Alabama, couldn't really find playing time there. A lot of untapped potential in terms of what you're bringing in on that offensive line as well.
Yeah, and again, similar to what they had at wideout, they had some spots to fill, especially in that interior. And at least if nothing else, you're bringing in some competition and some depth, which is certainly helpful. And Tommy Brockmeyer, again, he's a guy, like, I thought the tackles were solid for TCU last year, but you certainly could get an upgrade.
Yeah, 100%.
He's going to come in and certainly be fighting for one of those spots, either right or left. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's never bad to have that competition and have maybe 10 or so guys at offensive line who you can comfortably rely on.
I think you're starting to see that more. And even going back to a guy like Steve Avila, he played multiple different positions for TCU during his career. Like having a bunch of guys who can play different positions and provide depth is really important. The interior offensive line position, that's kind of easy to fill. That's kind of more of a plug and play kind of thing. And I'm not trying to underrate a guy like Steve Avila, who was phenomenal for TCU, but getting a guy, Tommy Brockmeyer, who has all the traits to be an All-American tackle coming out of high school, I think that's really big. And Dill, kind of how I want to round this out is TCU heading into 2023. I think they did a phenomenal job in the transfer portal, like we just talked about, kind of retooling from some of them what they lost. But what's the key for Sonny Dykes to kind of make it continue what they did in 2022 and be a Big 12 championship contending team, be a college football playoff contending team in 2023?
I mean, it's going to be a tall task at the end of the day in my mind for them to kind of, because they had just a lot of magic that it felt like went right.
Yes, that was a magical season.
They won a lot of really, really close games that maybe on the outset you kind of thought they would have lost. So again, do I expect TCU to like be a favorite or anything for the Big 12 title? Probably not. But again, we're early in Sonny Dykes' tenure. I think he's shown that there's something about being a winner and having a coach who inspires that confidence. Like a guy like Max Duggan, who you didn't feel like had that the year before under Patterson, I mean, he found something. Like, can he get a guy like Chandler Morris, who's really talented, to find that in himself and be that guy? That's honestly, again, they're not as talented as Texas and Oklahoma for sure, but can you get that?
See me fired up about what you're just talking about, because I completely agree, and I hand up was guilty of it a little bit last year. In the sense
we were the biggest TCU haters for the whole year. Oh, they're getting lucky. They're getting lucky.
Well, at a certain point when they're like 10-0, it's like they're not getting lucky anymore. This team is a winning program, and I think if you can take anything from 2022 and apply it to 2023, it's establishing that winning culture. When the game is tight in the fourth quarter, you feel confident that you're going to be able to pull it out. That's kind of the key. And there's a lot of teams that you can kind of say, like Texas might be one of those teams that just hasn't really had that. TCU clearly had it. And a lot of our listeners were kind of saying, like, at a certain point, you got to stop calling it luck and just start calling this program a winning team. And I remember we were talking about this Michigan matchup, saying, hey, Michigan on paper is a perfect matchup for Michigan. And it still kind of hurts me to talk about that game. But you saw that. Like, when the plays had to be
before the game's on the line, Quinn Johnson will make a play.
Max Duggan will make a
it's just like they pulled it out. They did what they had to do. Their big dogs step up in the
and that's moments. Probably barring any. I don't mean to like act like talent and having dudes on your roster doesn't matter, because it clearly does. I think Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, they've shown that it matters.
But Texas has proved it's not the only thing.
Yeah, there you go. And I think TCU has as well, where it's like at a certain point, having that winning culture, having the standard of we win tight games in the fourth quarter also matters. And I think TCU shows that they kind of have that. So, yes, they lose a lot, but this TCU program, year one under Sonny Dykes, established that winning culture. And I think it's going to maybe translate to 2023. Again, want to round it out there, but I appreciate all the TCU fans and just college football fans in general. The support you guys have shown truly does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, again, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to y'all later.